Ah, my dear, you know they named you before you could speak, dressed you in their delusions, painted your face with their guilt, and told the world you were the villain of their bedtime stories. They sealed your mouth with honeyed lies and made your silence the exhibit. You stood there, stitched into a role you never auditioned for while they rehearsed your funeral like it was opening night. They twisted your essence, rewrote your script, and dared to copyright your existence. But you didn't scream, did you? No. You studied the flames dancing in their eyes and memorized every flicker, because you knew the day would come when you'd light the whole damn theater on fire. They didn't want your truth. They wanted your shape, something they could bend, something they could mold and parade. So they clipped your wings, handed you a mirror smeared with their projections, and said, "This is who you are." And you looked deep into that distortion, not to find yourself, but to locate every fracture, every lie, every fingerprint left by hands that had no right. They thought the silence meant surrender, but it was just the inhale before the explosion. Because some storms don't roar, they smolder, they gather, they wait for the right second. Then they consume everything. They built shrines to their versions of you, whispered poison into ears that never asked for both sides. You became the monster because it made their halo shinier. They fed on the myth of your madness, decorated dinner tables with your name, and toasted to your downfall, like it was wine they brewed with their own betrayal. And still, you didn't react, not because you were weak, but because fire doesn't argue with those it intends to engulf. You see, when you're born in the ashes, you learn the language of combustion. Every slight, every whisper, every little jab. They didn't weaken you. They built the matchbox. You wore their labels like barbed wire around your throat. Every time you tried to breathe, it cut deeper. And yet you smiled, not from joy, but from calculation. Because what better disguise than the one they designed? Let them believe they won. Let them cheer while you dig beneath the stage and line the foundation with gasoline. Let them laugh while you study every crack in their fortress. Let them sleep soundly, thinking they've broken you. They mistook stillness for surrender. They never understood that the quiet ones are usually the architects of hell. They branded your name on sin they committed. They bled you into their narrative until no one remembered the original script. And when the crowd booed, when the crowd pointed, when the crowd spat on the version of you they sculpted from their own guilt, you clapped, silently, because you realized they'd given you the perfect alibi. You could become anything now. When they erase you, they forget your face. And when they forget your face, they can't see you coming. So while they laughed at the corpse of the lie, you became the phantom they can't touch. You started rebuilding, not to survive, but to annihilate. They gave you the blueprint of betrayal, and you turned it into a war map. Every accusation, every twist of the truth became a weapon. Not to defend, but to conquer. They thought they buried you in shame, but it was just fertile soil. Now your roots crack the pavement beneath their thrones. You learned the art of reverse. Infection, injecting silence into chaos, and letting it grow until it screams louder than any plea. You didn't fight their lies head on. You let them speak. You let them shout. And then you made their words your alibi while you orchestrated the collapse. They called you manipulative, but only after realizing you'd figured out how to move the shadows. They accused you of madness, but only because your logic destroyed their illusion. They said you were too much, only after they discovered you weren't something they could dilute. And now, Now they look around, wide-eyed, pretending to not understand how everything went wrong. As if they didn't light the match. As if they didn't pour the gasoline. As if your inferno wasn't built brick by brick with their fingerprints. No, they don't get to play the victim now. Not when the monster they created refuses to die quietly. You burned the fake identity, but not in anger, in strategy. You turned their story into smoke and watched it choke the very audience they'd performed for. You didn't just rise, you evaporated from their reach. They wanted to know who you were. Now they beg to forget what you've become. Because what stands in front of them isn't the villain they invented. It's the reckoning they never expected. You didn't return to clear your name. You came back to make sure they'd never speak it again without trembling. Let them talk. Let them lie. Let them scramble to clean the mess. Because now, they're playing catch-up in a game where the rules are written in fire. They want peace now. They want truce. But where was peace when they painted your soul with their shame? Where was truce when they twisted the knife and smiled in your face? You aren't interested in apologies carved from fear. You're here for silence, the kind that only comes after thunder has done its damage. Let them offer their hands. Let them weep into pillows soaked with realization. It's too late to reverse the burn. You warned them with your stillness. You begged them with your absence, but they kept pulling the thread. Now the entire tapestry is unraveling, and the only thing left to do is watch it burn. You didn't just reclaim your story. You rewrote the laws of consequence. They wanted to make an example of you. Congratulations. You're the blueprint now. Every mask they wear feels tighter. Every lie they whisper echoes louder. You haunt them without lifting a finger, not because you're cruel, but because you're thorough. You don't chase revenge. You become the storm so complete, so surgical, that even vengeance kneels before your artistry. And as the smoke rises and the ashes dance, you don't look back for applause. You stare ahead because this is only the beginning. They haven't even seen the part where you become the fire starter of every lie ever told in your name. And now that the ground beneath their feet trembles, now that their towers sway and crack with the weight of falsehood, now that they taste the smoke of their own sabotage, they look for a savior in the same soul they crucified. Oh, how poetic, how marvelously backwards. They built the pyre thinking you'd be the sacrifice, and now they realize they were the fuel all along. You walk away, not triumphant, but inevitable, and they still don't understand. You didn't come to win. You came to erase, to purify, to make sure that when history remembers you, it doesn't do so with pity, but with fear, with awe, and with the echo of everything they thought they buried roaring back to life in the inferno of your rebirth. And yet, they still kneel at the altar of denial. They press trembling palms against the ruins of their empire and whisper desperate prayers to gods that no longer listen. They try to stitch together the ashes, not realizing you've salted the earth beneath them. They call it misfortune. They call it karma. But what they refuse to call it, what terrifies them the most, is you. Because they never imagined the ghost they created would return wearing a crown, forged from every injustice they thought you'd forget. Their fingers bleed now, clawing at the walls of a reality they once controlled. The same mouths that silenced. You now scream in confusion, begging for explanations they aren't ready to hear. Because deep down, they know. They know this is the price of impersonating God in your life. They wrote scripture in your name, passed judgment in your absence, built temples of condemnation with your bones as the foundation. And now, those temples are crumbling, brick by lying brick. Not by some divine intervention, but by the very force they dismissed as too emotional, too unstable, too broken. They misdiagnosed your silence. They miscalculated your resilience. And now they're living in the aftermath of their misjudgment. You didn't need to raise your voice. You became the vibration beneath their certainty. You warped their foundations. Without a warning, you exposed every secret passage they tried to seal behind performative kindness and recycled empathy. You became the mirror they couldn't smash, the truth they couldn't outrun. They branded you with shame, thinking you'd hide. Instead, you wore it like war paint. You turned their guilt into gasoline and doused every narrative they built. Now their stories end abruptly, like a script caught in flames. There is no final act for liars when the protagonist they buried refuses to stay dead. And now they call you unrecognizable. Of course they do, because what stands before them isn't the version they created, it's the version they feared. They said you were too intense because your presence demanded truth. They said you were unstable because you refused to stay in the box they made for you. But now they whisper in corners, wondering how to fix it, how to undo the damage. But there's no repair for scorched earth. You don't negotiate with a wildfire. You get out of its way. And they're still too arrogant to move. Still pretending that a smile can outlast smoke. You gave them time. You gave them chances. You walked away when you could have detonated. You let them talk when you could have screamed. You let them build when you had the blueprints to destroy. And they mistook that mercy for weakness. They counted your grace as forgetfulness. But you never forgot. You cataloged every slight. You logged every betrayal. You built an archive of shadows and stitched them together into a storm so calculated, it doesn't even rage. It erases. It unwrites. It unmakes. Not loudly, precisely. Because when you burn it to the ground, it's not about revenge. It's about correction. They try now to weaponize empathy. They cry louder than the ones they harmed. They wear remorse like borrowed clothing, just tight, enough to appear uncomfortable. But you see through it. You see the desperation behind their apologies. Not guilt, fear. Fear that the story they crafted has crumbled and all that's left is exposure. Fear that their carefully curated masks are slipping. Fear that you've learned how to speak in the same language they used to silence you, but sharper, colder, impossible to misinterpret. You don't just hold the truth now, you wield it. Like a scalpel, like a guillotine. They whisper that you've changed. But the truth is you've just become visible. You've stopped shrinking. You've stopped apologizing for taking up space. And that terrifies them more than any scream could. Because when someone reclaims their narrative, every lie told about them becomes a ticking time bomb. Every bystander who played along starts to feel the heat. And now the whole stage is covered in smoke, and no one wants to admit they sold you out for applause. You were the sacrifice. Now you're the consequence. They tried to cleanse their sins in your silence. They tried to scrub their conscience with your ruin. But every lie they told aged like acid in their mouths. You hear them now, fumbling to rewrite history, to shift the blame, to say, we were just trying to help. But help doesn't come with knives in the back and strings attached to your every breath. Help doesn't feel like drowning while they cheer from the shore. And now that the tide has turned, now that you've learned to swim through infernos, they want forgiveness. But this isn't their redemption arc. This is your ascension. You walk through the wreckage now not as a survivor, but as an architect. You plant flags in the ruins. You turn your scars into blueprints. They branded your identity with lies, but you branded your comeback with precision. You carved your truth into steel, and now it rings with every step you take. They don't just see you, they feel you. In every crack in their foundation, in every silence between their words, in every mirror they avoid. You are the ghost of what they tried to kill, and the storm that refuses to die quietly. They tell others you're dangerous now. Of course they do. What's more dangerous than someone who's no longer afraid? They call your evolution a threat because your growth exposes their stagnation. You outgrew their script. You rewrote the genre. They tried to chain you in tragedy, but you turned it into mythology. And now your story doesn't end. It echoes. It infects. It spreads. Because the most dangerous truth is the one that was silenced until it learned how to roar through the ruins. Now they try to erase the evidence. They delete the posts. They distance themselves from the chaos they caused. They pretend they weren't part of the lie, weren't part of the branding. But you know their faces. You remember the ones who clapped while you bled. And you don't forget. Not out of bitterness, but design. Because memory is your map now. And vengeance? It's just a side effect. You're not chasing revenge. You're delivering balance. Not like a hero, not like a villain, like a reckoning wrapped in elegance. You didn't just survive their lies. You turned them into fertilizer. Every false story they wrote became a root system for your rise. And now you tower over their myths, casting shadows that remind them what they tried to bury. They thought they could end you with gossip, with smear campaigns, with passive-aggressive prayers disguised as concern. But you turned every word into a brick, every insult into mortar, every betrayal into scaffolding. And now you're building something they can't reach, something they'll never be invited into. You've become the monument they can't explain, and still they gather. Behind closed doors, whispering about how to contain you, as if you're still the same creature they once controlled. But you've learned. You don't seek permission now. You don't ask to be understood. You don't chase validation. You've learned how to weaponize truth, how to make discomfort your ally. You're not here to fix their perception. You're here to obliterate the lens entirely. You don't walk back into the fire. You are the fire. And their only hope is to pray that the blaze shows them mercy. It won't. They thought the branding would define you, that the lie would outlive the truth, that time would distort your name, until even you forgot its shape. But you remembered. You gathered the pieces. You sifted through the ashes. And now your voice carries weight. Not volume, weight. The kind that makes hearts stutter. The kind that makes liars hesitate. You have become the punctuation to a sentence they thought would never end. The final burning period on a chapter they never thought you'd close. And still, you rise, not from the ashes, through them, not because of what they did, but despite it. You don't need applause. You don't need understanding. You walk in full view now, unmasked, untamed, unapologetic, and they flinch. Every time you speak, every time you breathe, every time your shadow brushes the walls they once stood proudly in front of, because they finally understand. You were never the villain. You were the fire alarm they kept disabling, the warning sign they mocked. And now, the fire is here, and it carries your name. You don't chase revenge. You breathe justice. You don't need to scream. You let the silence between your words do the bleeding. Every step you take is a requiem for their comfort. Every truth you unveil is a dagger in the illusion they swore would protect them. You have become the storm they can't pray away, the consequence they can't outtalk. And now, as the smoke thickens and the sky turns crimson, they realize you're not burning down the lie for fun. You're doing it for history, for legacy, for every soul who was told to stay small, stay silent, stay broken. And as the horizon glows with the heat of your resurrection, they whisper your name, not in mockery, but in warning, because they know you're just getting started. And now they realize they didn't just wake a monster. They birthed an era. They lit a fuse and forgot the bomb was under their throne. Their whispers echo like confessions in a cathedral set ablaze. Because you, yes, you, have become everything they feared and more. You didn't come back for redemption. You came back as judgment incarnate, wearing scars like royal insignias, walking tall through the ashes they prayed would bury you. And look at them now, scrambling in circles like rats beneath a spotlight, choking on the smoke of a fire they swore couldn't burn. Their lies tried to drown you, but you rose as a tidal wave. And now, you don't even have to strike. Your silence is the drumbeat of doom, and your calm, your terrifying calm, is the thunder before their reckoning. You see, they made one fatal miscalculation. They thought their betrayal would break you. They thought the chains they forged from manipulation, gaslighting, and passive cruelty would hold. But you didn't just break free, you ripped the entire damn system apart, and they're still trying to glue it back together with trembling hands and nervous smiles, praying no one sees the cracks. But we see, don't we? You see everything now. You see through their grins, their performative apologies, their crocodile tears that taste like guilt when they hit the floor. You've walked through hell barefoot, and now you wear flames like armor. And them? They can barely stand the heat from your shadow. Funny, isn't it? How they used to mock your silence, said you were too quiet, too kind, too soft. But now that same silence is a storm, and they're terrified of what it'll bring. They know the vengeance isn't loud, it's patient. It isn't reckless, it's precise, and it's coming. You don't need to scream anymore. You are the scream. You don't have to prove yourself. Your existence is the evidence, your presence, the punishment, your growth, the guillotine. They wanted to play God in your story. They wanted to narrate your fall, edit your lines, direct your exit. But you hijacked the script, didn't you? You took the pen, bled all over the page, and rewrote the ending. And oh, how poetic it is that now they are the ones begging for a role, any role in the chapter you rule. But the curtain's closing, and you're done handing out second chances like candy to cowards. You're done letting the unworthy audition for access to your light. Look at how they panic when you walk in the room now, how they overcompensate, over-explain, over-apologize. They think they're fooling you, but every word is a confession. Every compliment is a bribe. They can't erase what they did, and you haven't forgotten. You haven't forgiven. You evolved, not out of love, not for closure, but because rage built a throne and pain handed you the crown. And now, their names taste like dust. Their presence feels like clutter. Their relevance expired. You outgrew the circus. You buried the clowns. You know what's even more brutal? You didn't come back to hurt them. That would have been too easy. No, you came back to outlive them, outshine them, to build something so unshakably real that their entire existence feels like a cheap imitation of what you've become. They wanted to see you cry, but now all they do is weep when they scroll past your rise. They hoped you'd beg, and now they're the ones pleading for another chance, to be seen, to be forgiven, to be near the very flame they tried to extinguish. It's tragic, in a poetic, biblical, karma on a horseback kind of way. And let's talk about that glow, that quiet, deadly glow. You don't need revenge when your aura is a battlefield. You don't need to confront them when your presence already exposes them. You've become the mirror they can't avoid, the reflection that shouts what their mouths never dared to admit. And trust me, they see it. Even in rooms you'll never enter again, they whisper your name like a ghost story with too much truth in it. They call you heartless now, but isn't that funny? Coming from the same mouths that drained your love like parasites and still wanted more. They call you cold, but that's just their guilt freezing over. No, you didn't become a villain. You became unreachable. And to the manipulators, the users, the ego-driven architects of your past pain, that's the real horror, isn't it? That you don't need them, that you're not seeking justice from their courts, that your success doesn't even acknowledge their sabotage. Because if revenge is satisfaction, then indifference is godlike. And you became a god of your own story, cruel to the unworthy, but divine to the few who stayed when the storm swallowed your name. Don't look back. There's nothing there for you. Just ruins and regrets, none of them yours. You've walked through the fire, and now your soul is tempered steel. You don't wear chains anymore. You craft them, forged from the boundaries you now enforce with surgical precision. They will never reach you again. They'll never lie their way past your armor, never disguise manipulation as love and get away with it. Because now, you know, and that knowing, that's their undoing. This final act isn't about revenge, it's about reign. It's about becoming the version of yourself that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't explain. The version that commands silence with a glance, that doesn't need closure because you slammed the door yourself and bricked it shut behind you. You're not who they left behind. You're the phoenix they thought was ash, and you've turned the battlefield into your kingdom. So let them talk. Let them invent stories. Let them pretend they were never the villain. Their words are dust now. Their games are relics, and every time they speak your name, it trembles out of their mouths like a prayer wrapped in fear, because you're no longer haunted by them. They're haunted by you. This is the final breath of the storm they summoned. You, standing tall, unshaken, unconquered, not as a survivor, but as a spectre of consequence. And as they wither beneath the weight of your transformation, let them know one thing, one final thing. You never needed to get even. You just had to rise.